بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا وقدوتنا محمد وتطعم والتعيين وتذكر التذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والدعوة للهدى والدلالة على الخير والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. أما بعد. Jazakumullah khair for returning back to the second semester of our Simplifying the Chaos lecture series. No doubt there'll be more people coming, I imagine, as the class goes on. How many of you attended last semester's lectures? Hands up. Okay. Some of you didn't. Today I'm going to do a recap on what we covered last semester for several reasons. The first reason is that we covered quite a lot of ground last semester, and obviously now you've done your exams, so on and so forth. There's probably a lot of things that you may have forgotten about. So I'm going to recap for those who attended as a refresher, and those who are new attendees. It's also an introduction, a summary over what we did last semester, and it's important that going into the second semester there'll be things that will make clearer for next semester, for this semester, if you know a little bit of what we covered in several weeks prior, inshallah. So the lecture series is called Simplifying the Chaos. And for those of you who may be asking, well, what chaos is there? There's a chaos in terms of understanding our faith, particularly in this day and age, as I am sure that some of you, if not most of you, are already aware of. And in last semester, I took a specific approach, which is to look at it historically. And we spent 8 weeks trying to answer this question. How Islam has been preserved, understood, and transmitted. So we know that Al-Islam, this deen of Islam, deen of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, unlike other traditions, this has been preserved. This is a promise by Allah Azza wa Jal. And we find examples or references to this divine preservation in the Quran, Surah Maryam, where Allah says, surely we have revealed the remembrance, and surely we, Allah, shall preserve it. So the idea, like unlike other faiths or the traditions that are being divinely revealed, and over time they've been changed, Islam will not suffer the same fate as those who came before it. That's a promise from Allah. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in the hadith narrated by Imam al-Tirmidhi, my ummah will not come to agree about manifest error or misguidance, dalala. The idea that the ummah in its totality will not come to agree about something which is very clear misguidance and error. Emphasis on the ummah, not in a specific time, but generally over a large part of time, which is explained in the next hadith. The hand of Allah, metaphorically, is with the majority. So follow the Sawd al-A'zam, which is translated as the greatest number. This hadith is narrated by Al-Hakim in his Mustadrak collection of hadith. That Allah is with the majority. So therefore follow the greatest number, and therefore you are with Allah. And Anas bin Malik, may Allah be pleased with him, said, I heard the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam say, my ummah will never agree on manifest error or misguidance. So, if you see differences of opinion, stick with the Sawd al-A'zam, the greatest number. And we are in that particular time where there are many differences. Many differences. And the way to deal with these many differences is to stick with the greatest number. So the idea that should be coming through is that safety in numbers. Safety in numbers. This hadith is noted by Ibn Majah. So what form did this preservation take? The idea that Allah Azza wa Jal has promised to preserve this deen. Well, what did this preservation look like? What form did it take? Again, my ummah, and this point I put in brackets, the scholars, the ulama specifically, will not come to agree about manifest error or misguidance. So the idea that the scholars, who are the inheritors from the prophets, al-ulama, warathat al-anbiya, they will not come to agree, all of them, all the time, will not come to agree on something which is all wrong. So the preservation that Allah's promised should be very clear and visible for the person to have a look at from a historical perspective. And I think that based on the hadiths and the verses of the Quran, I think we can reach the logical conclusion that the vast majority of scholars, for the vast majority of time, cannot all agree on something that is wrong. Okay? Historically, the vast majority of scholars, for the vast majority of time, cannot all agree on something that is wrong. And I think that, well, does anybody disagree with that? I'll put it in red. Anybody disagree with that? Because the alternative would be that all the scholars, the vast majority of scholars for the vast majority of our Islamic history can be wrong. I can't accept that, and neither should you. Because how is Allah going to preserve this faith if not through the vast majority of scholars or the vast majority of time? So that's basically is a summary of the ahadith that preceded before. And that's the take-home point going forward for the lectures. Okay? Alright, so question one. Again, we answered this last semester. How has Islam been understood, preserved, and transmitted by the vast majority of scholars for the vast majority of our history? How has Allah kept His promise? How has Allah Azza wa Jalla kept His promise to preserve this deen? And obviously, the hadith of Jibreel, which we now are very familiar with, in which the angel Gabriel comes in the form of a man to the Prophet ﷺ and asks him a series of questions. Three of which we're going to be obviously focused on, which is what is Islam? And in green, Islam is to testify that there is no God but Allah. And Muhammad ﷺ is a messenger of God, and to perform the prayer, zakah, fast in Ramadan, and perform the pilgrimage to the house if you can find a way. They are the 5 pillars. The 5 pillars. And then the angel Gabriel then said, well, tell me about Iman. And the Prophet then goes to explain it's the belief in Allah, His angels, His books, the messengers, the last day, and in destiny, it's good and evil. And then the third aspect which we are concerned with, ihsan, or spiritual perfection, it is to worship Allah as if you see Him, and if you see Him not, He nevertheless sees you. And the hadith is written by Imam Muslim in the Sahih collection. So Allah in His wisdom has promised that He will preserve this deen, as mentioned in the Quran, and this can be easily seen through history by what the vast, again, this principle, this idea, the vast majority of scholars for the vast majority of time have followed. So the level of Islam, the 5 pillars, has been preserved and conveyed to us by the Imams of Sharia. And we spent several lectures on this. For those of you who haven't, who weren't here, I suggest that you go to the Google Drive, which will, at the end, you'll have access to, and have a look at the lectures. And I believe the recordings are also there, so please go back and have a look at that. It's quite useful. And the level of Iman, or the 6 pillars of Iman, by the Imams of Aqidah, and we are looking at specifically at the Ash'aris, the Maturidis, and those amongst Ahl Hadith who do Tafweed. And the level of Ihsan, to worship Allah as if you see Him. That's by the Imams of Tazkiyah, or spiritual purification, or as we've come to understand, Tasawwuf. And again, this should be very familiar. Islam, there we are, the summary of the Hadith. Iman, 6 pillars. Ihsan, to worship Allah as if you see Him. And obviously, fiqh, or the 4 schools, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali, focus primarily, but not exclusively, on the 5 pillars. And Iman, or Aqidah, which the Ash'aris and the Maturidis and the Tafweed of Al-Hadith, they are focused on explaining the 6 pillars and refuting beliefs that are not in accordance with Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And Ihsan, as we know now, is the science of Tasawwuf. So the idea that these 3 edifices or 3 structures have been preserved through these sciences or subject matters. This term Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, which has been coined by scholars of the past, the term is used to designate mainstream Sunni Orthodox Muslims and their beliefs. How many of you have heard this term Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah? Okay. And the term Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the people of Sunnah and Jama'ah, the large group, it's been defined by scholars historically as those that follow one of the 4 schools of fiqh, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, and Hanbali, and one of the schools of Aqidah, namely the Ash'aris, the Maturidis, and the non-anthropomorphists of the Athari, Ahl Hadith, Hanbali, who do Tafweed, and those that follow a path of Ihsan or Tasawwuf that is grounded in the Quran and Sunnah. So basically, Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah historically has been defined as people who follow that. And this has been what the vast majority of Muslims, for the vast majority of time, have followed. And again, history is the biggest witness. Got a nice timeline. So we can see here Imam Abu Hanifa, who founded the Hanafi school. If this is the beginning of the Hijrah, when the Prophet migrated from Mecca to Medina, year 0, Imam Abu Hanifa dies around about 80 years after the Hijrah. After the Prophet migrates from Mecca to Medina, Imam Abu Hanifa dies around about 80. Okay. And Imam Malik, the founder of the Maliki school, dies around 179 or 993. This is all according to the Islamic calendar. And Imam al-Shafi'i dies around about 150, 204, around 150. And Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal, 164, 241. Again, as we mentioned previously, very early on in our history. Very early on in our history. And as for the schools of our Aqidah, we find that they're the Ash'ari and the Maturidi. We find Imam al-Ash'ari, who's a direct descendant of the great companion Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. And he is around about 2060 and dies around 324. And Imam al-Maturidi, the famous scholar in Aqidah, dies around about 333. So we're very early on, the founders of how Islam has been understood. These people, Allah subhanahu preserved this faith of Islam through these scholars very early on in the history of Islam. If we are around about 1441 here, you can imagine the vast majority of scholars for the vast majority of time have been following these scholars in their understanding of their faith. So when we look at the great scholars of Islam, okay, that the Ummah have agreed on, who have been the transmitters, the carriers of this faith throughout the centuries, without whom we will not understand our faith. Okay, scholars of hadith, of tafsir, of fiqh, of aqidah, it is difficult to find one in that definition that wasn't a follower of the Hanafi school, the Maliki school, or the Shafi or the Hanbali school of fiqh. Very difficult. And or is not an Ash'ari or a Maturidi or a Athari al-Hadith in Aqidah. And similarly, you can also say, or has not been a follower or a practitioner of at-tasawwuf. Okay? And here's a bit of homework. Well, not homework, you do it right here. But can you name 5 scholars as examples? This is where you wake up a little bit and I sit down. Don't all raise your hands at once. There's too many to pick from. Ishaq, Abdullah.
Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani.
So Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, who was the famous commentator of Bukhari, the most authoritative commentary on Sahih Bukhari. Yes, what can you tell us about him?
He was a Shafi.
A Shafi'i in fiqh.
He was an Ash'ari.
An Ash'ari in Aqidah.
And I think he was a practitioner.
Yep. So, that's anybody else? Another example? You don't have to mention in all subcategories, but you can name, for example, one scholar who, for example, maybe was Hanafi or Maliki or Ash'ari. Or how about you ask me and I'll answer? How about that? You ask, name a scholar of the past. See, this is where I start picking out people. I don't want to do that, you see. So this is where we kind of, help me help you. So Ibn Kathir was a Shafi'i in fiqh. And to the best of my knowledge, he was an Ash'ari in Aqidah. Somebody else? Any scholar from the past?
Sheikh Abdul
Qadir Jilani, a Hanbali in Aqidah and an Athari 100% in Aqidah. Al-Ghazali, Shafi'i in fiqh, Ash'ari in Aqidah, and obviously a great founder, a practitioner, and a theorist of Tasawwuf 100%.
Imam Bukhari.
Imam Bukhari, according to history, he was a Shafi'i. He was a Shafi'i. In Aqidah, you would argue he was Ash'ari, at the very least.
Imam Muslim.
Imam Muslim, Shafi'i. Bukhari is Shafi'i, Muslim is Shafi'i. Imam Tirmidhi, also a Shafi'i. How about you guys over here? How about you? Been smiling since you came in here.
Not sure. All of us already doing that.
You use that excuse. You guys can't use that excuse now. So, any scholar from the past? How about you guys over here? Silent. Any scholar? Imam Ahmad, he was an Athari in Aqidah, and obviously he was the founder of the Hanbali school. The idea behind doing that is to show you that it's difficult to pick out a scholar who we depend on to understand our faith, except that they will fall into this category. I'll leave this with you. Can you think of 5 scholars who were not? That's, you can go home. That will be homework. Have a look. If you can think of 5 that were not, that'd be useful. If you can. So, I have a bit of a challenge, you could say. Can anyone prove that the vast majority of Sunni Muslims, Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, for the vast majority of time, have not been followers of one of the 4 schools in fiqh? or followers of one of the three schools in Aqidah, or a practitioner, follower of Ihsan, as known by the science of the Tasawwuf. And that's a challenge that you have from now until Yawm al-Qiyamah. That's how confident I am. From now until Yawm al-Qiyamah, you can prove to me that the vast majority of scholars, for the vast majority of time, we're not like this, then I will follow you, wherever you are. Right? But from now until Yawm al-Qiyamah, you've got all that time to come and prove me. And so 30 years time, you got my number, which I'll be a bit freaked out, but if you had my number and you call me and you say, look, I've spent the past 30 years and I found out that it's not the case, then I'll be willing to hear and listen. I doubt you could, but I'm open to the possibility that you may be. I doubt it. Why? Because I've spent the past 20 years of my life and I've never seen anything else. Inshallah. But the challenge is there. Okay, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah and the people of innovation, bid'ah, quite important. Historically, sects, groups that deviated from Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the definition we have, were people of bid'ah, innovation, and largely still considered Muslim. Very important, largely. Some, however, became so extreme in their innovation, their newly thought out or understanding of Islam, so extreme that they end up leaving Islam completely. This is very important, more important than perhaps you understand. Shaitan will attempt to deceive as many people as possible to leave Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah and become people of bid'ah. Why? Why would Shaitan really focus on putting you out of that?
Because it becomes easier to be deviated when you're not with the majority.
Exactly. And his ultimate goal is to deviate you so much that you end up leaving Islam. Exactly. Thus making his ultimate goal of taking people out of Islam easier. Anyone who does not conform to the definition of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah that we've historically identified cannot claim otherwise. So should a group of people or an individual claim, I am on the methodology of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and then you find out that they don't subscribe to one of the four schools, in the three approaches in Aqidah, they reject it, and spirituality they completely reject as well. That individual should be rejected, or that claim should be rejected. Why? Because historically, you don't fit the match. I could stand here all day and say, I'm American. Yeah, I'm American. I am American, and say it loud and
Proud.
But I'm not American. I'm a British person, citizen with Arab heritage. Me saying I'm American doesn't change the reality. But I can say I'm free to believe whatever I want to believe. But me trying to convince you I'm American, you can say, that's a bit crazy, perhaps. Not that Americans are crazy. So follow this and know that you are in the majority. And thus, in my opinion, simplifying the chaos dramatically for anyone. Has those who've come throughout last semester, has the chaos or the confusion for a lot of you subsided? Those who put your hands up, I just want to see if what I'm doing is working. All right. Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up here. What confusion did you have to begin with? Let's have.
I was confused as to why so many people are behaving differently and arguing with each other on minor things,
Okay.
and others are just leaving it, and others are not bothering with the arguments, and this made me confused initially.
Adam?
It's the same reason.
Abdullah, you can't use that as
It is similar, like why there's so many divisions, and where do all of these trains of thoughts come from?
From the sister side, man?
I was confused about why do you have to follow a certain Muslim, like personally? Like, why specifically one?
Our famous diagram. So in the blue circle you have the Muslims, the Ummah, your average Muslim, wherever they are, wherever she is, the Muslims, in blue. And in green we have Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Not drawn to size, but visually, just to give you the indication. I've done that on purpose. Because you can be Muslim and not be from Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Historically, the scholars have identified that yes, there are groups, sects, movements that may not subscribe to one of the four schools, may not subscribe to one of the three schools in Aqidah, and may reject the idea of spirituality, but they're still Muslim. They are still, and this is massively important for this whole semester. So, Muslim, blue, and the green, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they all share a few things in common. The Shahada, they all believe in La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, and they acknowledge that facing the Qibla, praying 5 times a day, and eating halal food, which is basically taken from a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ mentions that those who pray face our Qibla and pray 5 times a day and eat halal food, they are Muslim. That's a general definition of your average Muslim. Okay? And obviously outside you have the non-Muslims. Okay? So we've dealt with question 1, and I think we've spent a fair amount of time convincing you that the vast majority of Muslims, and the vast majority of time, have been following one of the 4 schools in fiqh, and following one of the 3 approaches in Aqidah, and have followed and accepted the idea of spirituality of tasawwuf. The second big question that I answered last semester, that I'm going to summarize today, inshallah, is how to recognize who is an authority and who is not, when it comes to the very things that we've been talking about, like Islam, Iman, Ihsan. And this was last semester's lecture the whole lecture was on this, but obviously towards the end, many of you had gone home, so I think it's quite important that we have a recap and look at this in some detail. Everyone follows someone. You are all followers. You're following someone's interpretation. But whose interpretation of Islam are you following? Are they qualified? Oh, well, what makes them qualified? If you're saying they're qualified, what makes them qualified? And how do we judge who was qualified and who was not qualified? And why should we even ask those questions to begin with? Why even ask those questions? The sisters over this side, right? Why even bother asking that question? Yeah. Why do you need to know that though? I agree with what you're saying. You're right. But why? Yeah. You've seen my slides, haven't you? Basically, yeah. And no, I won't spoil it. Inshallah, I'll keep it for the following lectures. Inshallah. And Imam Bukhari relates in a Sahih, which is an authenticated hadith, that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Truly, Allah does not remove sacred knowledge by taking it out of servants, but rather by taking back the souls of the ulama in death, until when He, Allah, has not left a single scholar. The people then take ignorant people as their leaders, as their imams, as their guides, who are asked for and who give Islamic legal opinion without any knowledge misguiding themselves and misguiding of others. And this is a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ is basically telling you what is going to happen. Alright? This is a prophecy that will happen. And you could argue it's already happening right now. This process has already begun to occur. Anybody disagree with that? Most of you would agree with that. By the end of the semester, you will agree with it. Or you don't. Inshallah. But the idea that the death of scholars one by one until ignorant people are left, and then people begin to ask those ignorant people, and those ignorant people start giving answers, maybe with the best of intentions, but you're ignorant and you are misguided. You are misguiding yourself and you are misguiding others. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the hadith mentions that I am more fearful for you of other than the Dajjal. The Prophet said in the hadith, I fear more for you, more than the Dajjal. There's something else I fear for you as a Ummah. The Dajjal is one of the greatest fitnas. In our salah, in our tashahhud, we ask Allah for protection from the Dajjal, the greatest fitna. But what else is the Prophet saying? There's something else I fear more for you than the Dajjal. And that is scholars who are misguided. They are small Dajjals that misguide and lead people astray. That's a hadith from our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Which goes back to what you were saying before about they misguide. And we're in an age where there are many small Dajjals out there who are talking in the name of Islam and literally leading people down a path of Jahannam. Allah protect us. And this hadith is narrated in Bukhari, the commentary of Fath al-Bari by Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. So this process described by the hadith is not yet completed, but has certainly begun. In our times, the lack of traditional scholars grounded in fiqh, grounded in aqidah, grounded in tasawwuf, whether in Islamic law, or hadith, or tafsir, Quranic commentary, has given rise to an understanding of the religion that is far from scholarly and sometimes far from the truth. During the course of this lecture, I want you to look at whom you are currently learning your faith from. You can include me in that as well, but not just me, and a few more. And at the end of this lecture, you should be in a position to be able to tell if they are credible or not. In other words, going forward now, I want you to think about who you are currently learning your faith from. Alright? Whoever they are, you don't have to tell me. Whoever you are taking your Islam from, whoever you are learning your Islam from, be they a lecturer, be they somebody on YouTube, be they somebody you're reading a book from, be they an imam of the mosque, whoever it is. I want to bring those people to mind, and going forward, I want you to answer the questions that I'm going to be throwing up. I want you to try to answer the questions regarding to whom you are taking your faith from. I'm going to pose some questions that I want you to answer. Between you and yourself, right? I don't need to know. I want to jog your mind to start thinking about who you are taking your faith from. So a series of questions, I want you to begin to ask yourself the questions and try to answer them in regarding to whom you are currently taking your Islam and understanding of Islam from. Do you understand that going forward? Does anybody not understand that? Right, this is where some of you begin to read and I begin to say my voice. How about you read? Listen a minute. You're going to bear my accent?
No, much.
What team support?
Yeah.
Right, next. No, go on.
With the advent of the internet, satellite channels, and widespread distribution of information on Islam, people in this age have great access to understanding their faith. Muslims are learning their faith through TV shows, the net, social media, and modern literature. This has resulted in confusion with the sheer volume of different opinions. Faced with so many answers and opinions, they pick and choose what suits them. Follow the wrong opinion, or remain confused. This can lead people open to manipulation, misinformation, and indoctrination.
Is this not the case today? Is this not the case today? A lot of information out there, and people are confused. You just type in a particular question, and you're faced with a whole bunch of different answers. And okay, which one do I pick? Just wherever sounds the best. Well, this is not the way to take our Islam, the understanding of Islam. It's not the way. Those of you who know me, you know that, amongst other things, that I hate when somebody says to me, but I saw it on the internet. Or I got that from the internet. That's one thing that you don't say to me. Do not say that. Alright. Spot the difference. Are you paying attention? Can you, in the audience, differentiate between the following? A genuine, qualified scholar, or a preacher, someone who does da'wah, a preacher, or a qualified scholar, but in one particular field, maybe hadith, maybe a Quranic recitation, maybe fiqh, or someone for whom Islam is a hobby that they like writing or talking about. Give you a few moments to think about that, and I'll begin to ask you, inshallah, just to see what is floating around in the audience. Who's confident? Or who can at least tell the difference between any of those groups? Anyone? How can you tell the difference? Abdullah. Pick a category.
Genuine qualified scholar.
Alright, so in your experience, how can you tell a genuine qualified scholar?
Usually they'll mention where they've studied and what they've studied.
Okay.
And who their teachers were.
Alright, so what they studied?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
So,
and?
Where and who their teachers were.
Right, so why is that important for you?
Just so I know whether they come from one of the four madhabs,
Okay.
and I'd also, they usually do mention if they have an ijazah, or
Okay.
yeah, and they talk about what they've learned.
Or they've learned. So you would be suspicious if somebody was not able to tell you that.
Yeah.
So let's say Abdullah, not you, not Abdullah, who Islam is a hobby, they really like Islam. They're self-taught, number 4, self-taught. For you, you wouldn't listen to them.
No, I wouldn't.
Alright, let's say they had a following on YouTube.
Good for them.
Good for them. I like that. Well, let's say that, let's say they've written 20 books
On what?
on Islam.
Still wouldn't.
Still wouldn't.
No.
Okay. Alright, how about a preacher?
Preacher.
Which sometimes, you in reality, you could put number 2 and 4 in the same category.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of separate them out. Someone who does da'wah.
I would just assume they were a preacher if they didn't have any credentials.
So let's say somebody is giving a talk. Let's say there's a talk in a mosque, for example, and there's a poster.
Mm-hmm.
So to you, you would first, you didn't know who the speaker was, you would first begin to, Who is he? Where has he studied? And what has he studied? They're the kind of things that will be going through your mind. And depending on the answers will depend whether or not you go.
Okay.
What do you think that's a bit too far? A bit excessive? Hands up, who thinks it's a bit excessive, a bit too much? Hands up high. Okay, hang on, so keep your hands up. So it's 1, 2, and 3. Okay, wait. Sayyid Muhammad, why is that, in your opinion, excessive?
To an extent, you could, if someone wanted to learn, or they learned the right way, but it could be self-taught. Because now the Shafi'i learned in the beginning of his years. So a lot of shuyukhs will study. Some of them, okay, you could determine if they said they were self-taught, what have they learned, from what books. Then that could lead like, okay, you could get an idea of what they've learned.
So if somebody was self-taught, completely self-taught, and is giving a lecture on finer points of Sharia,
No, that's the thing. You can't do it.
or jihad, or women's rights in Islam, you wouldn't, would you? Who said ooh? Was it you? Did you say yes, isn't it? Lying is haram. Who said ooh? Yeah. That is the healthy response. Ooh. That's not, we shouldn't, topics like that needs speciality. Anybody else want to tell how they, kind of thought processes that go through their mind when deducing whether they listen to somebody or not?
Like, just back one step.
No, stick on this.
Okay, it depends on what the person is saying. So, like, if it's a preacher, like if they're giving like a generally good message, like take care of your mother, take care of like your family, then you can listen to them. But if someone who's qualified, like a scholar in one area, like
What's your name again?
Qasim.
Awesome. That's a good point. Yes, somebody's saying, well, look after your mother, look after this, look after that, generally, and for that, amen, and calling to aspects of our faith which are notorious. And you could argue that's okay. But what happens then when somebody goes and asks him or her a question and they will answer it wrongly? Or what happens when he or she begins to, the next time they do a lecture, they're talking about things that require understanding of the Arabic language and a deep understanding of the Sharia. So that's where, and for the average person who, wow, that was an amazing talk last week, who may not be able to differentiate, may then start going and following and listening and following the lizard down the hole, so to speak. Getting you guys to think, which is useful. Most just look at who appears like a scholar in appearance or speech, and of course who has the largest followers and likes on social media. Most people, that's what they kind of things that they look at. Very superficial things indeed. Right then, let's have situation today.
Many people who speak about Islam are not an authority, but speak as if they are.
That's one of the biggest problems in this day and age. Many people who speak about Islam, or write about Islam, or are talking about Islam, they are not an authority. But they speak as if they are. They speak as if they know it. And you may think I'm exaggerating. I am not. My experience tends to be that's the case. I wouldn't be putting everything I'm putting up, I believe. I'm not going to put anything up that I don't really believe. This is the reality on the ground. You're welcome to disagree. Step up another lecture on a different day and say I disagree with him. You can do that, but keep going.
We have all sorts of people now telling us what Islam says or doesn't say, what is halal, what is haram, what is shirk, bid'ah, and what is hijab, etc. Journalists, academics, preachers, speakers, students at university with no or little specialization in the Islamic sciences are speaking about Islam as if they were experts.
How many of you come across that situation? My God, that's too many. Shouldn't be happening. Well, keep your hands up. Who's confident in giving an example? That's a nice way of me getting you to answer that question without me picking somebody out. Who's confident in sharing an example of that particular situation like that? Amina?
That guy before the janaza said,
Okay. Yeah, no. Oops, no, you can't. I'd rather you come and eat than not come and eat here. Inshallah.
Certain news channels that like choose certain quote unquote qualified people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't wish to say the name of the news channels because it would be bad.
In the UK?
No, America.
You can say it, nobody cares. Well, that's true. Fox News, CNN, Sky News, the BBC, all they're getting better. UK, a bit more than others.
They appear to speak with conviction and authority. They are reaching very strange, unorthodox positions and views that range from the liberal, reformist, modernist right through to the violent jihadists.
Right through.
Right through to the violent jihadists and everything in between. Many people take their opinions without realizing that they are not credible sources. Most people have a very superficial understanding of who we should listen to regarding our faith. As a result of this, we see the mess we are in today.
So we have all these very strange, weird opinions that people come to. And as an imam, I'm pretty much, it just gets worse and worse. Some of the things that I hear, and they're almost convinced, no, it's like this is the way. And I'm like, it's not the way. You can sit there and tell me until you're blue in the face that it's meant to be this way or that way, or this is the right answer. But historically, you're wrong. You see. Well, unfortunately, this is the situation we're in today. Whom should we take our knowledge from? Adam. Not Adam specifically, but any.
Whenever Allah has sent a book to guide mankind, He has also sent a messenger to explain it.
Yes. Whenever Allah has sent a book to mankind, there's always been a teacher to explain the book, to explain the revelation.
This illustrates that the correct way of transmitting knowledge is through a living teacher. The role of the teacher is vital in aspects of knowledge that need explanation and interpretation. Whose interpretation are you following? Are they qualified?
So the idea that your Islam is taken through a teacher, and the example has been set by the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that Allah sent the Quran and sent the angel Gabriel to teach the verses of the Quran to the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, despite, according to Sunni Orthodox Islam, the Prophet being greater in rank than Jibreel. And that's an amazing thing in itself. But the idea that our faith needs teachers. It's not a faith of being self-taught. DIY Islam is an innovation, is a bid'ah. So whose interpretation, again, get you to think. I asked you before, who are you taking your Islam from currently? And I'm asking you now to think a bit more deeply on their qualifications. Are they qualified? And how do you know they're qualified? Keep going, Adam.
Not everyone is intended to be a scholar. For a society to function correctly, most people have other employment.
Can you all be scholars of Islam? Can you all commit 30 years of your life learning Arabic, learning the Quran, learning Hadith, learning fiqh? No, most people don't have the time or the aptitude, or even financially, are not able to do it. Right? Because people do other things, engineering, dentistry, medicine, politics, law, business. Not everyone's meant to be a scholar. But everybody needs a. Thus Allah orders us to ask the experts if we do not know. Adam?
So ask the people of remembrance, the scholars, if you do not know.
That's a verse of the Quran. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of remembrance. And the ulama say the people of remembrance are the scholars. You have to ask them. We do not know. So what do we have to do? Follow what Allah has said and what Allah told us to do. Go and ask the scholars. The question you and I have to try and answer, well, who are the scholars we're meant to ask?
Therefore, it is vital we know from whom we should ask for clarification on Islamic issues. Just like one takes medicine from a doctor, history from a historian, and the law from a lawyer, one must take Islamic knowledge from a scholar.
Simple, right? And we disagree with that? Good. Alright, give me some examples. Adam?
If someone who has read a lot of medical books but never studied at a university, began to give medical treatment, he would be arrested and disciplined.
Is that true or not true? True.
Now,
The same for someone who sets himself as a lawyer, having only read a few books without attending law school.
Would you go to that person for advice on law? No. Unless you're cheap.
If this is the case that we take with our earthly affairs, then
This is a care.
sorry.
Care.
If this is the care that we take with our earthly affairs, then how much caution must we have when dealing with our eternal fate, which affects us in this life and the next life and the hereafter? By simply wearing a doctor's uniform, one does not become a doctor. Similarly, merely quoting from the Quran or possessing outward piety or dressing and speaking like a scholar does not make one a scholar.
Massively important, that last point. Massively important. Just because a person quotes verses of the Quran and outward piety and dresses and so on and so forth does not, I stress, does not make them a scholar. And you should get that out of your mind if that is the case. If you think that's what a scholar is, you need to get real. Because that's not what a scholar is. Last Friday, somebody spent an hour of wasting my time. Remember, quoting these verses of the Quran. Okay, and what? You don't impress me. I'm not impressed. Why? Because you are misquoting the verses of the Quran. You can stand there and say it in the most eloquent way with the tajweed. But I know the commentaries. I know you misquoted it. Just because you can razzle dazzle and mashallah, beautiful voice, don't mean nothing to me. Don't mean nothing to you at all. Because you're misquoting the verses, which is a very dangerous thing to do. Putting words into the mouth of God, metaphorically. The Islamic science are a specialized field which requires years of dedicated study with qualified scholars. These two components are important. Keep going.
It has its own sources, methodologies and principles similar to other specialized fields. Those that are self-taught often at times are misguided and misguide.
Alright, again, I want you to bring to mind the people whom you are currently taking your Islamic knowledge from. Again, the people you are taking your Islamic knowledge from. And I'm going to ask you a series of questions that I want you to begin to think about in regard to whom you're taking your knowledge from. To be confident that you are receiving a proper, authentic answer to a question on Islam, one must ascertain the credentials of any speaker. Again, we spent last semester answering the question of how Allah has preserved the deen. And the good starting point is to therefore see if the speaker follows one of the four schools of fiqh, like Abdullah mentioned. One of the first things you do is look at which particular school does this person follow. Or do they belong to one of the three schools in Aqidah? And do they recognize the validity and the importance of the science of ihsan as exemplified by the science of tasawwuf? These are the kind of things that I expect you now to begin to automatically now start thinking of. Automatically. Those who've been coming from the beginning, that should be in your heads. If it's not, then you haven't been listening correctly. But they're like, just off the bat, straight away, these type of questions should be already now in your head already. Someone who does not or criticizes the above as being wrong or outside of Islam is a person of innovation or bid'ah. Why? Because that's historically the definition of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, Sunni Orthodox Islam, is that. Alright, so again, these questions I want you to try and ask with regard to the person you are currently taking your knowledge from. So, Ishaq, I like your voice.
Thank you. Where did he or she study?
Yes, where did he or she study? Are you able to answer that with the person or persons you are taking your knowledge from?
Who are their teachers? What are their qualifications? What is their field of expertise? Even if they have academic qualifications, are these combined with the study of classical texts?
In other words, they have a master's or a PhD in Islam from Coventry University, for example. Nothing against Coventry University, just to give an example. Have they also combined the studies at university at an academic level with the study of classical texts? Why? Because there's a big difference. Someone who has combined them both is a lot more knowledgeable. Someone who hasn't studied classical texts always will be at a severe disadvantage to those who have. Take it from somebody who, from experience, that is definitely the case.
Do they understand the context and culture of the place he is issuing a ruling for?
Yes, rulings differ from place to place.
Are they currently actively practicing? And the greatest question we should be concerned with is,
What time do we finish?
do they have a sanad or unbroken chain of transmission? Do they have an ijaza, permission, authorization, license to teach?
So in your minds right now, you should be beginning to ask yourselves these questions of the people you are currently taking your understanding of Islam from. And you should be able to, I hope, at least try and answer some of these questions with regards to those people you are taking your faith from. But apart from those questions, I want to draw your attention to the last two. Do they have a sanad, an unbroken chain of transmission? And do they have an ijaza, permission, authorization, or license to teach? The next few slides, I'm going to be talking about this. So the concept of sanad, an unbroken chain of transmission. Bismillah. Alright, back to Abdullah.
The concept of sanad, unbroken chain of transmission, one of the unique attributes of Islam.
One, meaning that other faith traditions do not have a sophisticated understanding or practice of this. To understand that.
Having a continuous and unbroken sanad with respect to transmission, understanding, and spiritual purification. An unbroken chain of teachers who are traced back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
So that's what a sanad is, an unbroken chain, unbroken, not broken, of teachers who are traced back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Amongst the special features of classical Islamic education system approach is that its sciences and knowledge disciplines are passed down and transmitted from generation to generation, and which constitute a continuous and unbroken chain of religious scholars and practitioners. Every generation receives from the generation preceding it a continuous chain and uninterrupted understanding.
So the idea of a sanad is at the top, or from the foremost things you should be really focusing on finding out if the people you are listening to have. In other words, does the individual you are listening to or taking your faith from have a sanad, an unbroken chain of transmission back to the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Do they have a sheikh? Somebody put on Facebook today, run away from a sheikh who does not have a sheikh. As a friend in California put up this morning. Run away from a sheikh who does not have a sheikh. Quite profound. Because where is he getting his knowledge from? Who taught him? Just because 70,000 people follow him and like him, or like the way he or she talks, doesn't mean nothing. Like my friend who, rattled off several verses of Quran. And what? Nothing. Well, the verses mean something, but your interpretation means nothing. So the idea that you take knowledge from a sheikh who was taught by a sheikh, who that sheikh was taught by a sheikh, right back to the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that is one of the secrets of this faith. One of the ways that Allah has preserved this deen is through this. One of the secrets of the preservation of Islam is through sanad. Because people can't come in and set themselves up as a sheikh and be an authority. Why? Because where do you come from? Who are your sheikhs? So that has protected Islam historically from deviation. The second is ijazah, permission to teach.
None of the students who follow this approach will venture to take up leading positions, except after receiving knowledge and keeping long company with scholars, until they grant him permission or a formal license in transmitting, especially hadith narrations, teaching, writing, and imparting knowledge.
So once you've sat with a sheikh or a group of scholars who have this unbroken chain back to the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they then have to authorize you to go and teach. So it's not enough that you've gone and sat with scholars. Have the scholars given you the thumbs up and said, go and talk? Have the scholars said, and you go and teach? If they haven't, then that person should not be teaching. If they haven't gone to a recognized institution that teaches Islam classically and has a form of ijazah with examination, a formal examination or written examination or an oral examination, where the teachers have said to you at the end, Bismillah, go and teach it, that in absence of that, you should remain silent. Or the people teaching you should remain silent.
Should you inquire from one of them as to his teachers, he will mention a number of them. Should you ask him how long he has spent in the company of his teachers or teachers, he will say that he has spent a long time in their company until he understood and comprehended from them the methodology of understanding and the entries to knowledge.
So they've sat with scholars, with ulama, for several years. They've absorbed the knowledge that they've been given and they embody it, and the teachers have felt that they are capable now to go and teach. Okay, that's the idea of ijazah.
This is contrary to other approaches which are broken and interrupted, and in which a student will take a leading position without keeping company with the scholars.
This is the age we're in right now. The type of thing that happens right now is this. People who haven't sat with teachers, or have, but not enough, and then go on to talk.
And should you ask one of them how much time did he spend in the company of his teachers, he will tell you that he had only met him once, or that he had only spent a limited number of hours with him. How is it possible for him to have obtained knowledge, and how can he understand? And how can his understanding be trusted?
Right. I believe that Isha has come in. Am I correct? Isha has come in? Yes, it has come in. We'll talk about a question. Those of you, we'll take a break, 10-minute break. In that time, those of you who need to go and do wudu, please go and do wudu. Don't leave a pool of water behind on the floor. And then we will pray, inshallah. Please come back, don't disappear. You know, these lectures are massively important. And the second part, where I'm going, is going to be quite important. I'm going to set up where I'm going for this semester in lecture. So please return back, inshallah. Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, continuing. So this idea of the preservation that Allah Azza wa Jal talked about and has promised, in practice, what does it look like? So Islamic scholarship has been protected for centuries from misguidance by preserving authentic knowledge through an unbroken chain of teachers, which we now know is called Sanad. Back to the original authority, the Prophet ﷺ. So we take, for example, the Quran, the science of Quran recitation, for example, the scholar would have learnt from his teacher, who had learnt it from his teacher, and so on, back to the Prophet himself, ﷺ. See, that's how the Quranic tajweed was preserved. So somebody can't just come in and tell you how to recite the Quran, because that person must have been taught himself, who had been taught by their teacher, and so on and so forth, back to the Prophet himself. And that's how we now know how the Quran was pronounced. Other books don't have this. The Torah, as far as I know, does not have this. The Bible certainly does not have this. But the Quran does. We now know exactly how it was said, how long the words are pronounced for, and the ways not to pronounce it. That's all been preserved. And that in itself is a miracle. That in itself is a miracle in and of itself. Again, it's a reminder of Allah's promise to preserve His deen. The scholar would have direct connection through a line of teachers to the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and ensure the Quran was recited as it was revealed. This is why it has said regarding the concept of sanad. Anybody else going to leave? Okay, mashallah. It's good. All right. Inshallah. It's okay. All right. This is why it was said regarding the issue or the concept of sanad. Sanad is part of the religion. It's part of our religion. The concept is part of our faith. And if it was not for the concept of sanad, people would have said whatever they wanted or whatever they desired. لولا السند لقال من شاء ما شاء. And that famous phrase is from Imam Abdullah ibn Mubarak. If it wasn't for sanad, the concept of an unbroken chain of transmission, if it was not for that, people would say whatever they want. And that's basically today. That's your forums, that's online, that's Facebook, that's Twitter, the conversations you have between your friends, the conversations you have at home. That's basically it. The absence of that. People saying whatever they want, whenever they want. Imam Malik, famous founder of the Maliki school, Muslims throughout history have shown extreme caution regarding Islamic knowledge. Extreme caution. We learn from the Sahaba themselves that when they were asked a question, they would prefer others to answer rather than themselves. Right? This concept, this idea, sometimes people ask me questions, and if there's 3 or 4 people around, it's barely, there's always one of them that will say something. None of the answers this. Especially after Jum'ah, people ask me a question, and I'm like, I'm cringing when somebody jumps in and answers the question. Because I point you out, you're a fool, you're wrong, I'm sorry, shouldn't keep quiet. If he was asking you, okay, he's asking me. I wouldn't mind if you had knowledge, but you don't have any knowledge, and you're jumping in and answering as you've got knowledge, you're not being asked. Nothing to say, and saying it too loud. So this is the way of the early generation of Muslims. Extreme caution, the idea of trying to answer quickly, showing what you have. For most people don't have much anyway to begin with. Imam Malik, this is an example. Imam Malik, in one gathering, was asked many questions. Some say 37 questions. This was the Imam of the age, the great scholar of Medina. They say when there was no one would give fatwa. If Imam Malik was in Medina, there was no point in anybody else giving fatwa. He was the go-to scholar, Imam Malik. But 37 questions he was asked. The vast majority, he said, I don't know. And this man who was asking came from far away. It wasn't as if he phoned, he traveled many miles to ask Imam Malik a list of questions that he probably had from his own people. And Imam Malik answered to maybe 80% of the questions, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. And this man's like, wow, just come all this way to ask you, the famous Imam Malik, these questions, and you answered 80% of them with I don't know. Yeah, what am I going to say to the people? And he said, go back and tell them I don't know. Because the idea of being truthful and the idea of not rushing to answer questions because you get it wrong, that's your neck on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Your neck on Yawm al-Qiyamah. So the fear of Allah, a deep accountability before Allah Azza wa Jal. Taqwa, in other words, fear of Allah. Quality assurance, what does that mean? Quality assurance? Making sure you get what you paid for. Alright, anybody else? Get the good stuff. Alright, yeah. The non-technical version is somewhere in between those two. Due to the danger and harm which unqualified scholarship can cause to normal citizens, the head of the Muslim state had the power to ban and punish unqualified scholars. Just like now in the UK, the government has things in place to stop people pretending to be doctors or to be lawyers and so on and so forth. There's things in place, there's laws stopping people from pretending to be people that they're not. In classical, in healthy Islamic countries, we used to have this, where people who are cowboys or fake, they'd be stopped. Back in the past, the community, the people themselves, when they were healthy and had knowledge, they would stop them themselves, they would walk out, and person would have nobody listening. But we're not in that time right now. Today we have an absence of such a body that oversees this quality assurance, especially in the West. We don't have this type of quality assurance to make sure that what you're reading, what you're listening to, what you're seeing online is the right thing. And therefore, unqualified people are free to say whatever they want, even if it is wrong, and on top of that, feeling entitled to. I have the right to say this, my opinion. And I'm like, who are you to feel this entitlement to be, answering questions, or to be? You're welcome to your opinion, and I'm welcome to ignore you, particularly when you are talking about a specialized field. Talk all day, but I'm not going to give you any time, and I will call you out. I'll call you out for being wrong, because I know this field is my field. If you are qualified in this field, Bismillah, come and benefit from you. But when you're not qualified, and you're talking in this field, and talking with conviction, and think you have a right, you just sit down and be quiet. Sit down and be quiet. So this has allowed two extreme groups to emerge that historically have been controlled in the past. So two groups have emerged when we don't have this quality assurance, when we don't have a healthy Muslim leadership that monitors deviant type of beliefs on people who are talking. When we don't have this, then generally two extremes come up. So the two extremes. We have the ultra-conservative. All right, I couldn't think of a better word, but there we go. Let's go with that, ultra-conservative. And who are the ultra-conservatives? Very rigid, intolerant, and they are very takfiri. What is takfiri? They're prone to calling people kafir. You're a kafir. You're not Muslim. All right, that's one extreme. Declaring other Muslims who don't follow their understanding as non-Muslims. If you're not following my Shaykh, my group, you're going to hell. As if, I say in Arabic, and it sounds better in Arabic, but as if the keys to heaven, your dad owns the keys to heaven. In Arabic it sounds better. In Urdu it just maybe come off the same way, but in Arabic it sounds better. So this is one. Alright, and this is very dangerous. Very dangerous. Because this is the roots to the bloodshed you're seeing in the Middle East, right there. Then we have the second extreme, ultra-liberal. What do I mean by that? Well, very progressive in Muslims, modernist, reformist, who want to change everything and anything according to their own whims, their desires, and the political mood of the time. What is politically good? What's in this time, and what's out in this time? And that's what we're going to say. That's how we're going to reinterpret Islam. And they engage in making the haram lawful and the lawful haram. Has anybody come across these type of people? Hands up. All right, does anybody want to share examples? Hands down. As quickly as they went up, they came down. Okay, Amina, mashallah. Which group? Both?
Not a group, but
Okay, which of these two? One or two?
the ultra-liberal.
All right, give me an example without naming names. Unless it's Haq, you can.
TED Talk.
All right, the TED Talk. All right, which is, what's TED Talk for those who don't know?
It's just people giving lectures.
All right. So what did you hear?
It was a woman who was saying that hijab is not valid.
Okay. How many of you have heard that? Give your hands up. My God. All right. So you're saying hijab is not fard. And that would be, so yeah, ultra liberal. See what's shocking about that? We're still recording, right? Okay, shocking. You get the PG version. What was I say? No, I'll leave it to the end. Ask me at the end. I'll give you the uncut version. What I'm going to say. Inshallah. Anybody else?
ISIS.
Okay, give me an example.
ISIS.
Alright, yeah, ISIS. 100%. Adam?
There's a guy in Australia who wants to reform the Quran. So, for example, they say, pigs haram because it was dirty in the past, but they're clean now because we've got technology to clean it.
Yeah. It's interesting for me because I'm hearing these things, because just it reinforces what I'm seeing and what I've seen, and just give more examples. And for those of you who are sat here hearing it from other people, obviously reinforces what's in front of you above. Any other examples, Amina?
People saying that the times for prayers should be set during the day to match how, for example, some.
Yeah, that one. That one, yeah. The problem is he's saying too much sometimes. Yeah, that one. Hanif?
Yeah, I met people calling them Sufis
Uh-huh.
without
Now, we now know that, yani, just to
without
clarify,
being
that
Muslims.
ah,
It didn't make me.
yeah.
It makes,
So those who claim to say that they are people of tasawwuf, which is ihsan, which is to what? To worship Allah as if you see Him.
And if not, you believe that He's
But you've got people who are saying we are people of tasawwuf but don't believe in God. Yeah, same type of thing. Plenty, like very hippie type of people. Yeah. Anybody else want to make me laugh or cry? Any other examples? No? All right. Two sides of the same coin. Why is that? Why are these two groups essentially the same coin, but two sides of the same coin? Both approaches are attempts at reinterpretation. They're both reinterpreting the faith. All right? Both of them are looking at the faith and to reinterpret it according to whatever's going on in their minds. And they then begin to attack Muslims who follow mainstream scholarship as being backwards. You are not progressive. You are irrelevant. You are out of touch. Or you are kafir, or a person of bid'ah. Anybody been called backwards? Or in a sense, or not being progressive or irrelevant, out of touch in this sense? Maybe other senses, some of you maybe, but in this sense, anybody? Yeah, yourself, Amina, Saira, MashaAllah. What about kafir? Okay, interesting. Anybody else been called kafir yet? Kafir? Ask you been called kafir. Called kafir. La ilaha illallah. Anybody else been called a kafir? Out of interest, you have to tell me. If you are open to, you can want to say out.
Yeah, I don't know who.
Without mentioning names.
I don't know who it was.
Unless it's
It was just off Instagram. Someone called me a kafir.
On Instagram?
Yeah.
MashaAllah.
It was, I think they were Ahmadi.
I know, they called you a kafir on the basis of. Maybe I told you something to jump
No, I didn't know them. They didn't know me. They just. Yeah.
Just like that.
Just like that.
MashaAllah. More lucky than me. Anybody else been called a kafir? No? Okay. Anybody been called a deviant? Deviant? You want to share that? Share? If you feel. Maybe if you want to put your hands up, you want to share it. Why you a deviant? Or called deviant? Anybody want to share?
Like celebrating
The Mawlid. We call it deviant. Anybody else? We call it deviant. You deviants. Silent.
Following your madhab.
Ah. Doesn't it surprise you how much conviction they have? It's an amazing thing, right? They have conviction. They're talking with conviction, with certainty, right? And vigor. In reality, both approaches are shaped by their personal desires, whims, and the political mood at the time of what is acceptable and what is not. Trust me, after 20 years of dealing with these idiots, this is what I found. There are people who are their personal desires, their whims, and the political mood. Generally, that's the wind in the sail of the boat. That's my experience. How can you say that then? Well, it's based on the Quran. What the Quran talks about these people, not specifically, but generally, yes. Well, what's the verse of Quran? Have you not seen the one who has made his own desires, what I want, what I think is good, what I think is halal, his God, his legislator? And Allah has thereupon let them go astray. That's people who are saying hijab is not obligatory. These are people who are saying that Mawla is this and this and that, calling people mushrik and bid'ah and so on, and all this madness. Own desires. That's all it is. Because you are not following the ulama, mainstream, classical, orthodox, mainstream Sunni Islam. You're just following your desires. That's all that is. And obviously you are welcome to disagree, but I've got the mic. That's the verse of Quran. Following their own desires. It should make us fear Allah, right? When we look at, we should make dua for them, and we should be scared. Yeah, these type of people following their own desires. Imagine going 20 years in this state of mind, and you're out worshiping Allah and His Messenger, and you're not, you're following desires, your whims, whether it's the extreme group or the ultra-liberal. That's all that is. Alright, this is answering a question that was asked. I thought I deleted the page, but subhanAllah, Allah made me keep it, inshallah. This is answering a question that was asked during the break. When deciding between a scholar and a preacher, a person of da'wah, it is only from the scholar that we should take Islamic rulings, specific Islamic rulings, halal, haram, like a fatwa specifically, okay? As for preachers, one can benefit from them in non-technical issues, like encouragement to do good, paying your parents, the things that, the feel-good type of things, or the feel-bad, hellfire, so on and so forth, all right? But there's a condition. This is providing that they subscribe to Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And when I say Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, that's a big group, by the way. Anybody who follows one of the four schools, not any, just any of them, it doesn't have to be Shafi'i, any of the four. Anybody who subscribes to the Ash'ari, or the Maturidis, or the Ahl Hadith, provided they are not anthropomorphists, and anybody who comes from the definition of tasawwuf with those other things mentioned. That's a large pool of people. You split for choice, if you know who they are. Now, why do I add that condition in? Well, not me, but scholars add that condition in. Is because generally people who are not from Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah will take advantage of saying a beautiful speech, really nice talk, parents, or really moving talk about heaven, or a really scary talk about hell, and so on and so forth. And they have a plan in mind, a long-term strategy, which is suck you in and then start indoctrinating you into everything else. Oh, that's a bit extreme. That's 20 years of seeing it. That's 20 years of me seeing that. I've seen it with my own eyes. People doing that on purpose. Alright? And they kind of like just, who's heard of the Pied Piper? Quickly, the Pied Piper, what can you tell me?
He loves kids away by the
Playing a song and walk, getting the kids away. Alright? You've got Pied Pipers singing the tune of the Quran and the Sunnah and so on and so forth, and people are following it. And that person has a plan. And then you sat down, and next thing they're telling you, this is the correct aqidah, and this is the correct thing, or no, we don't need hijab, we don't need this, we don't need that. It's just a way. That's why the Prophet referred to them as deviants. Some scholars have been at Dajjals. That's a very Dajjalic way at leading people astray. And you who are innocent are getting led astray. Unless you come into this class, which you shouldn't be. If you don't, you run the course of getting confused. Paying the price. When unable to tell the difference or differentiate between genuine sources of Islamic knowledge, some have paid the price by being caught up in the two extreme groups that we mentioned. And this is very common for students at university, is it not? Do you find people gravitating towards these two groups? Amongst the sisters, do you find groups of sisters moving away and gravitating towards very ultra-liberal or heading in that direction? Or you maybe find sisters heading in the other direction? You will see it. I'm seeing it. Such groups try to stop their members from accessing genuine scholarship. So for example, they would say, oh, don't go to these Monday night classes. Why not? He's a deviant. Or why is he a deviant? Because he believes this, this and that. Or Akhi doesn't follow the correct Aqidah, the Aqidah of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Or doesn't follow my Shaykh, or doesn't follow this, or this, or that, or this, or that. Or isn't qualified. Typical things you may have heard. Doesn't surprise me if you have. But the idea is that they're trying to stop people accessing genuine scholarship. And I'm somebody who is able to unlock scholarship for you. I can show you the way. Open the doors and have a look. And you see it for yourselves. And so it's only when members of these type of groups eventually come into contact with genuine scholarship, people who can articulate clear arguments from a solid scholarly basis, that they then begin to question what they've been taught by their own groups, and then begin to leave. Right? When you come across scholarship, explain, well look, this says this, this says that, and this says that. And let me share something with you. Somebody who's taken knowledge from an unbroken chain of transmission. With the jazz, I spent time with scholars. There's a taste, there's a vibe, there's a way that they have that others don't. You can sort of almost feel it. It's something different. No exaggeration, I can walk in, hear somebody talking for about 5-10 minutes and work out if they have said it or not. And they could be saying very, very harmless things, but I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling the love. I'm not tasting it from you. There's no barakah. There's no blessings. I'm not seeing it, I'm not feeling it, I'm not hearing it. And it's maybe quite difficult for some of you to understand, but once you've sat with scholars who have this for a long period of time, or sat with people who have done this, you begin to absorb it. And you begin to, okay, I can differentiate. Because there's a blessing in hearing something that has been mentioned by a sheikh, back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's a blessing in that. That others who don't have that, won't have it. So these people, once they come across, they begin to leave these type of groups, so on and so forth, and then some have gone into exposing the distortions of these groups. But my fear is this, that they end up leaving Islam. Can you imagine like 20 years of your life following a particular scholar or a particular way, only to find out many years later that was not the main way. In fact, everything you've been brought up, or everything you thought was mainstream classical Islam, you were following a sect of Islam that is not representative of 1,000 years of Islam. For a lot of people, that is such an overbearing weight. And for a lot of them, they just lose faith in any scholar. If I can't trust the Sheikh who I took my Islam on, if I can't trust the sheikh who's taught me, if I can't trust that sheikh who did this and done all these things and sacrificed it and was there answering my questions and teaching me and all of these things, who I looked at as greater than my own father, for you to find out that he wasn't on the mainstream understanding of Islam. For a lot of people, they just lose, they can't trust anybody else, and they end up leaving Islam. And that's not an exaggeration, and I've seen it. I know people right now who are no longer Muslim. I know people right now who are barely Muslim. And these are people who are banging on, giving lectures, giving talks, traveling around the UK at that time, the loudest to be heard. So no, left Islam. No longer Muslim, because they burnt out. That's the idea. Going back to what did I say about shaitan? His idea is once he gets you out of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, get you away from that, you're then in the realm of innovation, and then it's easy for him to take you out. Because then people just burn out. If you're following in Islam that there's no rules, it's all halal, you're just like, okay, there's nothing in it. There's no taqwa. Or you're following a version of Islam that's all haram, 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 and hate everybody and be suspicious of other people. You burn out. It's not sustainable. It doesn't give you anything. And people burn out, and people think that's Islam. And if you get to 40, should Allah allow you to reach the age of 40, right? Remember what I'm saying right now. Should you live to the age of 40, you will see people like this. You will see people, in the description I've just given you, you will know people by the time you get to 40, you will know people who've left Islam. Just remember what I'm telling you. And this is why knowing your faith is vital in this day and age. So summary, a long list here. Qasim, you want to read? Have you finished your whatever you're eating? So I've made a list of people. You okay to read?
Yeah. Summary, who not to take your faith from.
So who not to take your faith. Now remember, I did say to you in the beginning, we've nearly finished by the way, those of you asking. I did say that this lecture, I want you to keep in mind those people who you've been listening to or learning your faith from, and the questions that I'm asking all the way through, I want you to address them to those you are currently taking your faith from, and seeing whether or not they should be people you're listening to. So I've got a list of who not to take your faith from. Are we ready?
Yeah.
Bismillah.
People will use the term shirk, worship anything besides Allah, bid'ah, and kafir.
I like when you skip the brackets. Bismillah. So people who use the term shirk, bid'ah, and kufr. These are three words. If you hear somebody using these words more than Allah and His Messenger, run away. There are people, that's all they use. Bid'ah, shirk, kufr. Alright, so these three words, if that's the only words in the Arabic dictionary they know, run away.
Regard anyone that doesn't agree with them as deviant. Those who preach hatred of non-Muslims and other Muslims. Those who promote division amongst Muslims. Those who regard themselves as the only ones following true Islam and view the majority of Muslim scholars as wrong. Those that claim the way of the Salaf is only found in my group, Sheikh. People who promote not following madhab in favor of following the Quran and Sunnah as understood by their Sheikh or group.
Yeah, people who promote following a madhab, or people who promote not following a madhab in favor of following the Quran and Sunnah. Brother, follow. What according to who? To your Sheikh.
Do follow school but advocate the picking and mixing approach. Simply saying just go back to the Quran and Sunnah. Claim that Ash'aris and Maturidis are deviant, heretical, despite the majority of the Ummah following them. Tasawwuf as bid'ah and has no place in Islam. Or anything else that goes against what we have come to understand as the way of the vast majority of Muslims for the vast majority of Islamic history.
What's your name?
Rishan.
Rishan. You okay to read? Yeah, Qasim, finish that last line.
Then you should not listen to them.
continued, who not to take your faith from. Those who want to reinterpret everything to suit their views, even issues which have been agreed upon for centuries, e.g. hijab.
So that TED talk woman, should be avoided, like the plague. That China, is it in China? I should avoid that, we should avoid it. No exaggeration. Because the worst that can happen is you die from that. But the worst that can happen from that woman, that shaitan, is
Those who criticize / argue with everyone and anyone. Those who speak ill and disrespectfully of the Sahaba and the family of the Prophet ﷺ. Well-known scholars, especially those that are dead, who have been known for their piety, knowledge and service to their faith, and whose books have been recognized as a source of Islamic knowledge for centuries. Those who don't have Sunnah or Ijazah.
Okay.
And you should not listen to them.
And if anybody at the end of nearly 2.5 hours is willing or is comfortable in not doing that, then you share the burden of that on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Don't blame me if you find out or you end up following something that is not mainstream, or you end up following a dangerous view. Don't blame me. You've been warned. Oh, let's have back to Ishaq.
Faith is based on knowledge, so be careful from where you take your faith from.
Faith is based on knowledge. Your faith, your Islam, is based on knowledge. Be careful where you take your faith from.
Taking knowledge from unqualified sources can and is having devastating results in our faith and lives. Are you taking your knowledge from the right person?
Okay. And obviously, I've been drip the idea into your minds about the people you're already following and listening to. Do they fulfill these conditions or not? That's for you now to go away and deal with. If you want any help, come and see me privately, and I can try and answer some of your questions in that regard. But I just wanted to draw your attention to some key aspects. That's why I did that.
The reality today. Given that we now know that the vast majority of Muslims for the vast majority of time have followed one of the four madhabs, Ash'ari, Maturidi, Athari in Aqidah and Tasawwuf, leaving a handful of innovated sects that have not. Do we find this to be the case amongst our family, friends, communities, mosques, universities, online, TV, Islamic bookshops?
Well, do you? Uncomfortable pause there. Let me hear what you have to say. Let's start with you. Is that the case or not the case? Your experience, generally?
Yes, in general, yes.
Yes, it is. Yes, it isn't.
I have seen a mix of both, I'll say. Yes.
Okay, so you've seen a mixture.
Yes.
All right, Adam.
Yeah.
That's the best you can do. Yeah.
You see a lot of it. It's more prevalent online.
Online. So what kind of things are you seeing online?
So like I said about the guy from Australia, the whole reformation of Islam to suit the needs of this political climate. And a lot of people are happy to follow because ignorance.
Does it surprise you how many people follow?
Yeah.
Shocking,
It's
isn't
crazy.
it? Abdullah, did you think you're outlining, did you think, is this the case? Would you, because basically what I'm saying to you is that Islam has and will always be understood in this particular way. However, when you step out of this class and you go away to whatever you do, family, friends, and online and whatever and so on, is this the case?
There's certainly people I know that follow mainstream understanding of Islam, but I think most people are just clueless, so they don't really fall under any denomination.
Okay. Ishaq? Your experience?
Not really had any really.
One person to ask. lives in the bubble. Back, sisters. Miriam? I would say that a lot of bookshops, should you walk into them, by the way, we finished now, by the way, so I think I just leave you on this point. I would argue that in my experience, most bookshops that you go into, with the exception of a few, the vast majority would have books in there that would tell you or would have you believe that we don't need to follow a particular school. I would say that a lot of books in a lot of bookshops would be saying that the Ash'ari school and the Maturidi school are schools which are deviant. I would argue that there are books also in those bookshops that say Tasawwuf is bid'ah. I would also argue that there are views that have been made popular in this day and age, which is not mainstream. In fact, let me go one step further. If you were to go online and see what the previous Mufti of Saudi Arabia, for example, Al-Uthaymeen, famous Mufti of Saudi, passed away, famous scholar of Saudi Arabia. He has a fatwa in which he says that the Ash'aris are people of deviance, of bid'ah. In fact, I wouldn't be exaggerating if I was to say that the official response from Saudi Arabia's the scholarly elite or establishment in Saudi Arabia, the official position of Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, is that the Ash'aris and the Maturidis are deviant sects. I've seen it, I've heard it and I've seen it and I've read it in Arabic and English, just to be certain. And following a madhab, so on, and tasawwuf, innovation. So, we've got a problem, right? When you've got a country like Saudi Arabia, where Mecca and Medina is, and that's where the Hajj is, then officially they're saying, and they have been for decades, just to be certain, for decades, they are saying that the way of the vast majority of Muslims, the vast majority of the time, has been wrong, essentially, reading between the lines, that's what they're saying. Then that's a problem, right? When you hear a sister said to me that some of her relatives believe that Allah is in the heavens, in the sky. That is the aqidah of the Sahaba, of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's not the aqidah of the Prophet or the Sahaba. But the issue that's become widespread, the fact that I had to spend 8 weeks talking to you and convincing you of what is Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah is proof that we're confused. We don't know what it is anymore. And what we think we know is not the main way. So, if not, then what is it that they are following? What is it that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, for example, what are they following? Ash'aris and Maturidis are deviant sects in that which they got wrong. That's what he said, right? And they have a very on-off answer with fiqh, madhabs and very anti-tasawwuf, as is classically been understood. What is going on? What's going on there? And more precisely, what caused that to be the case? You don't find that from the Egyptian Azhar University. You don't find, if you go on the Azhari website, and I put it on recommended reading for one of the slides, or for the lectures, who are the Ash'aris? It will tell you the Ash'aris are versed and are well-known scholars, and they make up for the vast majority of Muslims. That's the official response from the Azhar University. But Saudi Arabia, you're not getting that. And Iran, you're not getting that either. So what's going on? What's causing this to be the case? And that's what I'm going to be answering this semester. That's where I'm going this semester. So who can tell me what's different about the slide?
The blue.
What has it been called for the past 9 weeks or whatever?
Traditional understanding of Islam.
Huh?
The traditional understanding of Islam.
Yeah, it was a summarized version of what I was saying. So what have I changed here? Those who are paying attention. What's changed on the slide?
The blue.
Oh, what, the blue? What did the blue say originally?
How has Islam been transmitted historically for the vast majority of time?
Now we've changed it to what?
Looking at the factors that shape our understanding of Islam in the contemporary world.
And that's what we'll be doing this semester, inshallah ta'ala. Fascinating. I can't wait for you to hear it. I'm not just saying that for you to come, well, that as well, but fascinating. It really is fascinating. What's causing people to think the way they are thinking, the historical factors, and the political factors that are shaping our understanding of Islam in the contemporary world. Okay? Get ready to be rocked, as they say. And more specifically, we've spent 9 weeks looking at the green, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. We are now going to be looking at the blue, the non-Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the blue. That's what we'll be focusing on, and highlighting just how strong and how powerful and how influential these views are to the average Muslim. You will be shocked and perhaps you'll be saddened just how strong these views are, and how currently mainstream Orthodox Islam is on the back foot. Well, it's getting there, it's coming, but it's on the back foot. And there's factors and there's forces that have led that to be the case. So we're going to show you why that is, and inshallah, I can't wait for you to hear it. Inshallah. So that's basically where we're at this Wednesday. Al-Ghazali's book. Monday night is a bit of a heavy type of class, but it's needed. Wednesday is a spiritual class. If you want a spiritual boost, here's something really nice and inspirational. Okay, Wednesday is the class to come to as well. Don't slack away from the Monday. Monday is important, more so for you in this day and age. You need to know the things I'm going to be exploring this semester. You need to know. But the Wednesday is important for your hearts. Okay, give you the balance. So that's it, inshallah.